Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lady over here on the left, Professor Danusha Goska from William Paterson University in Wayne, New Jersey. She's going to be talking about negative stereotypes of Poles in popular American culture. Pani Goska. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. In the days leading up to the Poland First to Fight conference, one of the presenters, I'll say good morning again and thank you again for being here. In the days leading up to the Poland First to Fight conference, one of the presenters was giving one of the planners a very hard time. Like a flight of determined migratory geese, emails crossed the Atlantic. 20 minutes? You're just going to give me 20 minutes to talk about this? That's not enough time. The woman is Polish and she fights hard, but she lost. So I've only got 20 minutes to talk to you about my work. My work is different from the other work that you've heard these past 3 days. Stacy Fitzgerald, Kenneth Koskadan, Krystyna Zamorska, and everyone else talks about facts, dates, names, events, atrocities. I don't talk about facts. I talk about these. I talk about the lenses through which people perceive facts. You can state the complicated and astounding facts of Polish history as clearly as possible. And you get this, and you get this. If you think I'm making this up, I'll give you some examples. In the 2004 documentary, Hiding and Seeking, made by Menachem Daun, who married the child of a Holocaust survivor whose parents and uncle were hidden by Polish peasants, visits his sons. Now, these young men are grandsons of a Polish Jew who survived thanks to Polish peasants. And these sons say, we want nothing to do with Polish people. Further, we want nothing to do with Christians. And he asks the man who was rescued, and the man who was rescued said, the only time you can trust a Gentile is after he's dead. The only good Gentile is a dead Gentile. So do the facts change people's minds? Often not. Another example, in the book Shtetl by Eva Hoffman. Eva Hoffman gives the story of a Polish Jew who, again, was saved by Polish Catholics. And this woman tells her story to Eva Hoffman about how numerous Polish people had to keep their mouths shut or give her some food or give her some help. And at the end of that story, the woman concluded by saying, now you see why we hate the Polacks. Another example, when I did research for my book, I asked modern-day Jewish Americans, what do you think of when you hear the word Polish? And one of my informants said to me, I think of big, beefy peasants, not very smart, but very strong. This young lady knows Polish people in real life. And she said that they're white-collar professionals and they're quite intelligent. But knowing real Polish people did not interfere with the stereotype in her head. My work is dense. There is no soundbite version. There are many different scholars cited in this book. And it's also difficult. Sue Knight is a British woman I know through the internet. She's been reading my work for 25 years. And she says that when she reads my work, she keeps the biblical Psalms at her elbow to help her get through it. It's not easy. It's not easy to read about the Holocaust. It's also not easy to read about people distorting the facts of the Holocaust, of Nazism, of World War II, in order to sell a stereotype. So I cannot give you my full presentation today, and I got an email late last night from one of the organizers saying, don't do your full presentation. I'm only going to do part of it. But I did distribute a handout that has the YouTube address of the full presentation, and you can watch the rest of it on YouTube after I finish my 20 minutes. So Biegański is a book not about facts, but about how we talk to each other. And by we, I don't just mean Polish people, and I don't just mean Jewish people. I mean all of humanity. And when I come to the second annual version of this conference, I want to see Black people here, I want to see Jewish people here, I want to see Asian people here, because the Polish story is central and vital, and everybody should be learning from this, including my students. I'm sorry. This is the first time I've had this thing in my hand. Okay. So Biegański is a book about how we talk to each other. It's about how we talk to each other about the Holocaust. It's about how we talk to each other about any kind of hate or atrocity. It's about anti-Semitism. It's about any kind of bigotry and prejudice. And it's also about suffering. Whose suffering matters? Whose suffering are we taught to care about? It's about diversity, multiculturalism, and it's about neighbors. It keeps advancing without my pressing it. I don't know what to do. I'll wing it. I'll wing it. Is there a way to stop it from auto-advancing? It's advancing. I'm not touching it, and it's advancing.
Yeah, all we can say is it's still now. Well, there it goes. Are you touching it again?
No, I haven't touched it. What to do? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so what button do you want me to press? Excuse me? Yeah, that's what I've been doing, but it's auto-advancing. Okay. Okay. Biegański is also about hate, how people understand hate. And one of the things that you need to know is that in books that are not about the Holocaust, Polish people are used as the perfect example of a hateful population. And one of the books I cite in my book is a book that's simply called Hate. And it starts by talking about Polish people and how hateful Polish people are. And then the author goes on to talk about hate in general. So we are the haters, and we need to know that. This is bigger than just this room. This is about people being taught that we are scary and dangerous and bad. It's about how we talk to each other. There's lots of good books about our history and about our suffering, and that's not what my book is. It's about talk. Here we have a picture of a Christian and a Jew talking to each other. And it looks like it's just two people, but there's actually one other person there. And the one other person there is Shylock. That's the stereotype of Jews, very negative stereotype of Jews, kind of hovers over the conversation. Every time a Christian and a Jew talk to each other, Shylock is in the background, and it becomes a no man's land. It becomes a battlefield. And we take a lot of care because we don't want to feed into that stereotype. And something similar happens when Black people and white people talk to each other, because there are negative stereotypes of Black people, negative stereotypes of white people, and you can make an innocent comment to a Black person as a white person, and it can be completely misunderstood because of these negative stereotypes and negative stereotypes of whites. How about when Poles and Jews talk to each other? And these are real people who I really know, and some of them have Polish Catholic ancestry, and some of them have Polish Jewish ancestry. What happens when they talk to each other? We want to feel good about each other, we want to get along, but we've got this stereotype hovering in the background, the negative stereotype of Jews. And so when we talk about the difficult aspects of Jewish life in Poland, we exert a great deal of care. We don't speak carelessly. If we're going to talk about how there was a large number of Jews who didn't speak Polish, if we're going to talk about the middleman minority status of Jews in Poland, if we're going to talk about Jews who are in the communist security apparatus, we exert a great deal of care. And we walk on eggshells. And we do this because we're not anti-Semites and we don't want to talk like anti-Semites. One thing that anti-Semites do is they go through the Talmud and they pick out verses and they say, see, this particular verse, this is why Jews are bad people because of this verse in the Talmud, which is a terrible thing to do. But what happens when someone who's identified as Polish says something public that's critical of Jews? Agnieszka Holland is a Polish director. She made these high-profile films, In Darkness and Europa, a Europa. And she made a negative comment about Claude Lanzmann. She was vilified in the international press. How dare this Polish woman say something negative about Claude Lanzmann? Her father was a Jew. Nobody cares. She has Polish identity, so she's not allowed to say something negative about Claude Lanzmann. People don't attribute Jewish identity to negative behavior. You all know, I suppose, that when the Soviets advanced on September 17th, 1939, some Jewish people greeted the Soviet tanks with bread and salt. And this is Michael Steinloff, an excellent scholar, and he wrote Bondage to the Dead. And when he wrote about Jews greeting the Soviets triumphantly and warmly, he said, it's because of local conditions. It's not because all Jews are communists. There was something going on locally that caused these Jews to engage in this activity. And this effort to understand any kind of negative behavior that Jewish people engage in is found in the popular press. We all know about Bernie Madoff, we know about Jeffrey Epstein, we know about Harvey Weinstein. When a Jewish person does something bad, the press jumps in and says, listen, we can't be anti-Semites. We can't say that all Jews are doing these bad things. And these articles appear in the press and say, don't be prejudiced, don't attribute this negative behavior to all Jews. But that what happens, so we work as hard as we can not to be anti-Semites and to banish Shylock from our conversation. But my argument is, and the argument of my book is, that it's not just Shylock. There's another stereotype haunting conversations between Poles and Jews and between all Christians and Jews. And I call that stereotype Yugański after a character in a book. And you see this image of sort of a brutish-looking peasant. That's the stereotype. And by the way, my parents were born peasants, so I am not anti-peasant, and I am quite proud of my peasant ancestry. The brute Polak stereotype, more animal than human, brutal, violent, stupid, ignorant, dirty, primitive, unevolved, hateful, bigoted, chauvinistic, superstitious, specifically Catholic, inferior to clean, educated, modern, multicultural, secular people. That is the lens. And people who have internalized this stereotype would have heard every talk the past couple of days through this lens, especially the talk previous to mine about Dmowski. We're chauvinistic. Poles are chauvinistic. That's just it. Okay. And this stereotype is everywhere, and my book demonstrates that it's everywhere. It's in journalism, it's in academia, it's in government, it's in church sermons, it's everywhere. And this is the Ruderman Foundation, which helps people with handicaps, which is an admirable goal. They made a video of Jewish people just repeating the words over and over again, Polish Holocaust, Polish Holocaust, Polish Holocaust, because we are responsible for the Holocaust. Our identity, our essence is responsible for the Holocaust. This is Alan Dershowitz, a very prominent and influential lawyer, public speaker. He wrote in the Wall Street Journal, which is mainstream media, an article that creates a metonym. What's a metonym? A metonym is when you take something small and make it stand in for something big. For example, if I say the track, I'm talking about horse racing. In Alan Dershowitz's article, Poland is a metonym for the Holocaust. Catholicism is a metonym for the Holocaust. Church sermons is a metonym for the Holocaust. Now think back to what I just said about the Talmud. It is an anti-Semitic strategy to go through the Talmud and pick out negative quotes and say, this is why Jews are bad. Alan Dershowitz does the same thing. He goes through like this Catholic church sermon or that biblical verse and says, this is why Christianity is anti-Semitic and responsible for anti-Semitism. I recently reviewed a book called How to Fight Anti-Semitism by Barry Weiss. She's a New York Times editor and journalist. She wields a lot of power. She mentions Poland in passing in that book, published in 2019. Every mention is negative, and she blames anti-Semitism on Christianity. I also write about Islam. Islam has some very pointed anti-Jewish quotes in the Quran and in the Hadith. She says, no, it's all Christianity's fault. This is a well-reviewed book published in 2019. This image, and I'm not clicking. You can see I'm not clicking. It's advancing by itself. This image is called Revenge of the Peasants. Christopher Hill, who was the US ambassador to Poland, this is a diplomat who was paid with our tax dollars to be diplomatic to Poles, called Polish efforts to clean up talk about World War II and the Holocaust, Revenge of the Peasants. And the image is of peasants torturing people, chopping people up, lynching people. We're violent, we're vengeful, we're bloody, we're irrational. This is from the mouth of a United States ambassador, someone who is now teaching diplomacy at an American institution. He's an Obama appointee. So, I don't know how much time I have left, but I want to at least mention this word, to essentialize, to essentialize. The Biegański stereotype essentializes. It says that this is our essence. Remember when I was talking about the Jews, some Jews, not all Jews, cooperating with the communists. I said Michael Steinloff, a scholar I greatly respect, in a book I love, Bondage to the Dead, I recommend the book. He says that the Jews who greeted the Soviets with bread and salt and flowers, they don't represent all Jews. They were responding to local circumstances. It's something that happened in the past. That's not to essentialize. Biegański essentializes. It says it's our essence. No matter what we do, this is what we are, for all time, for eternity. So the criminals who did bad things in Jedwabne represent us, and we are them, and there's no escape. And I've been working on Polish-Jewish relations for 30 years, and I've been at conferences like this, and I've been in all-night conversations, and I have to tell you that no escape part is key. As long as we are Polish, as long as we are Catholic, we are bad. And that's what Menachem Daum quotes his father-in-law as saying, you don't trust a Gentile until he's dead. And I'm not essentializing Jews, because this is not all Jews, but there are some Jews and some non-Jews who have internalized this stereotype that essentializes us. Okay, this is one of my most pronounced experiences of being essentialized. I was a graduate student on the campus of the University of California at Berkeley, a very demanding school, not easy to get into. And one of my fellow graduate students said to me, you must be Jewish, you can't possibly be Catholic. And I said, why? You know, I'm Polish, I'm Catholic. He said, no, you read. And he was completely serious. You cannot be of Polish Catholic ancestry. That's to essentialize. So I'm saying it's everywhere, it's found everywhere in our culture. Even Barack Obama, who I'm sure did not want to insult Poles, referred to the Polish death camps. And one of the arguments I get from well-meaning people is they say there's no such thing as a stereotype of Poles. And you know, they're very aware that black people are stereotyped, they're very aware that Jews are stereotyped. And when I was doing my research, I invited Jewish people to come to my house and to be interviewed. And they would, you know, they're good people, they're nice people, and you know, we're all American, and we all like each other, and I was in a college town. and they were drinking my tea and eating my cookies, and we're all getting along. And I would say, what do you think of when you think of a Polish person? They'd say, I grew up in a house without prejudice. I don't have any prejudices. And then I would ask them a couple of questions. And the first question was, you need brain surgery. You have a choice between two surgeons. On paper, their qualifications are exactly the same. One of them is named Dr. Smith, and one of them is named Dr. Kowalski. And they would get this horrified look on their face. And one of my informants, and you can read about it in my book, stutters and stumbles, and he says, I kind of hate to admit it, but I guess I don't want that Kowalski messing around with my head. And another question I asked them, and this happened so profoundly with one informant who was just a lovely man, very warm, very effusive, wanted to be my friend, didn't have a problem with my identity. And I said, you're on a TV game show. You've just won a round-trip, all expenses paid trip to Poland. How do you feel? And his face just fell. And he immediately said, I don't want to have anything to do with anyone who played any part in the Holocaust. That was his first sentence. And I had another informant, when she was answering this question, she gave me this long, long answer. And at the end of her answer, she said completely unself-consciously, I'd love to go back to Vienna. Vienna? Hitler, born in Austria. So I have a guy who posts on my blog, and he's always saying, it's the Jews, it's the Jews. It's not the Jews. The stereotype is everywhere. This is James Carroll, Constantine's Sword, very influential book. He's a former Catholic priest. I think he's Irish, I'm not sure. Irish-American, I'm not sure. In his book, he lies about how many Poles were murdered in Auschwitz. Like, if somebody lies about 6 million, they're a Holocaust denier, and they're a very bad person, and they don't win award after award after award. But this guy lies about how many Poles died in Auschwitz. And he says, Poles like to imagine that they have suffered. And that's part of the stereotype, that we are big whiners, and that we feel sorry for ourselves, and that we make up these stories that we've suffered. That's the lens through which people hear us when we speak. It's this stereotype. And he says that Jews have really suffered, and we need to respect that. But these Polish people imagine that they've suffered. I think I'm probably, I don't have much time left, and I think I'm probably going to stop now. This gives you an idea of what I'm working on, and you have the flyers that have the address to the rest of the presentation, and there's also another presentation on the flyer that talks about the history, goes back 4,000 years, and I hope you'll have a look at both of them. And I just want to say one more thing. I am so grateful to the gentlemen and ladies who planned this conference, who undertook this conference. I am incredibly grateful to the people who donated to this conference, and I am really, really grateful to every one of you who came to hear me speak today. You are doing a really good, heroic thing. I've been immersed in this topic for a long time, and I've read story after story about heroic people who will never get their moment on the world stage. And I cannot tell you how many tears I've cried over this topic, and I really believe that the Polish Jewish story is a story that the whole world should hear. There's someone, maybe it was Stacy, it might have been, said if people can be monsters, they can also be saints. And Romeo Dallaire, who was in Rwanda during the genocide, wrote his book and titled it Shake Hands with the Devil. He said that he encountered evil, and he also encountered God in the midst of the Rwandan genocide. And we have stories like that, and they need to be told. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Goska.